I think we are live on air once again, and this is Be Smart on Air. I'm Niilo. Hello, and every now and then I get this great opportunity to talk with people, really interesting people connected to education, learning, quite a bit of information technology in that context as well. And today I have with me Ewan McIntosh, and that's really cool. Ewan, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and thanks for the invitation to your show. And the flag in the background kind of reminds me of the last time we were actually able to see each other face to face.
Yeah, this is neat. What a show, man. There must be at least one or two watching or something like that.
No,
I'm very selfish in a way, I do this stuff because I learn so much. That's one part of it, and the other part is it's tons of fun. So if someone else has fun watching or listening, that's like an extra bonus, of course.
yeah, and most of I think it's the interesting thing, a personal connection from I reckon 11 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, spikes my curiosity as much to understand kind of how your thinking has changed over time too. Not just the way I may be thinking differently about learning, and even in your introduction, you didn't really talk about ed tech or technology. And I think 11 years ago, that's what we would have said. We would have started out with.
Yeah, man, 11 years ago, almost 11 years ago. I guess we might go back in time right away since you already started with that. 11 years ago, that was in Brussels E20 launch, huh?
That's right. And
Uh,
it was. I only discovered recently. I was in the first couple of, well, I think 183rd person to sign up on the e-twinning platform, um, and it was all to find a school to do a project with relatively last minute, and I was amazed how quickly we were able to do that and find common ground. And this, at the time, it was before Twitter, before Google Plus, before Facebook. So actually making connections with people was really hard, and e-twinning at the time was revolutionary. And I think it's interesting, 10 years on since e-twinning, I was at their birthday party last year. Many of those connections are still there, um, but it's continued to find its voice. Even though you've got easy technologies to connect with other teachers, it's continuing to find its relevance in showcasing work, when so much of stuff that's shared is, it's kind of samey. It's difficult to find quality, and I think they're doing a really good job of finding quality and providing interesting opportunity for teachers in Europe.
Agreed to that. And of course, e-twinning is the European Union school collaboration thing.
Hmm.
Like, how would I put it? Dating service
Kind of, it is. It's a dating service for teachers.
for educators getting connected, educators and students getting connected across the borders. Pretty neat stuff. And like you said, it's been growing at an amazing rate. So I'm glad having that flag there in the background, really.
Yeah.
um, okay, going back, let's go even further back, and talking about you, Ewan. How did you get into education to start with? Was it like destiny from the very beginning, or what happened when you went to school? What did you have like in your mind those days mostly?
Most of the time, I was playing that game that I think a lot of students play, which is doing school to get as good a grade as you possibly can, playing the grade system, and that was all that mattered. I was exactly the kind of student that I don't want to see students be today, chasing points. And I think that it meant when we got to that fifth year of high school, having to make decisions about what to do, I really was none the wiser. I didn't have an idea of profession, what I wanted to be. Both my parents were teachers.
There you see, it was destiny, huh?
Well, I think
No way escaping that, huh?
yeah, trying to do everything probably to not become a teacher almost.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
My brother is a journalist, it still is. He's well known in his industry, and I think I toyed with that for a while. I'm a really keen drummer and musician, my office has the drums ready to go.
Whoa, very nice, very
Um,
nice.
that's still my passion today, and
Mm.
piano next door that I enjoy playing. So, um, but my father's a musician. He's a music teacher, but a musician, and probably I didn't enjoy practicing piano when I was 16 enough to make a career out of doing it. Enough to enjoy, the hard work that's involved to make a career out of that. And when I went to uni, I studied European Union studies to become a European lawyer.
Mm.
Um, I thought that's what I wanted to do. And again, it was probably still playing that same game of doing what other people expect you to do, rather than doing something because I'd found a passion in my life.
Mm.
And I really enjoy teaching. I fell into teaching somewhat. I started out teaching in French universities.
Yeah,
And
right. You've been in France quite a bit. Actually, I mean, you are 100% bilingual. Your family is a bilingual family, right?
exactly, yeah. And so, the first time I went over there, I fell in love with the country and I
Mm.
wanted to live there. When I went back after graduating, initially I wanted to create some kind of startup in technology. This was 99, 2000, so everyone was building startups, it seemed, but
Hmm.
not in Edinburgh, not really in the UK, actually. France was one of the key places.
Yeah.
And the problem was realizing how, so much of every 10 francs, as it was at the time, that I had made was going to get lost. It was going to go back to the government. And kind of, what's the point in doing this? I looked at the big graduate jobs with big companies, and again, not really chasing a passion, just chasing the idea of a paycheck and
Mm.
a little bit hand to mouth almost. So
Mm.
I think that maybe explains quite a lot of my attitude towards schooling today. That if young people leave school without a keen idea of where their passions might lie, and if they leave university, much the same. And I think they do kind of go one into the other because university is such a fast-paced part of your learning experience, and frankly, you should be enjoying the experience rather than
Mm.
over worrying about what you're going to do with your life. You can get to the point where you now actually need a lot of time to work out what you want to do because you've got to pay your rent, and that time in school is so precious. It's more precious to work out what you might want to do with your life rather than playing this grading game. And I went as far as trying to join the army. I thought I wanted to be an army officer, as a translator, interpreter,
When
and
was that? How old were you then?
2000,
How young?
2000, yeah. And every time I went for the interviews, they said, "Are you sure you don't want to join the Education Training Corps? You would be a wonderful teacher." And this is without knowing the parental history. So I think maybe it's something I'm good at. It's certainly something I enjoy. But it's funny how I tried so hard not to become one. And I think
This is
now
so
that what I enjoy doing, I still only spend 70% of my time with schools. The
Mm.
rest is outside school. I'm working with some incredible creative people. I'm also working with organizations that struggle with their creativity
Mm.
and want to think differently.
Mm.
And I think having that naivety actually helps when you're trying to come up with new ideas.
Mm.
If you think you know everything, if you think you're an expert, if you think you're better than everyone else around you, then there's no way that you can help people think differently because they're only ever going to want to think the way you think, and
Sure.
you're going to try
Sure.
and do. This way around, it's great because I'm an amateur, and at least in 30% of my work, I really know nothing about the automobile business is one that we're working in at the moment. I don't even have a driving license.
We
Um,
must get back to the stuff you're doing now and all this notage thing, definitely. But before that, you've been doing some pretty interesting stuff in Scotland as well earlier, right? With
it feels like a
education.
long time ago now, yeah.
Could you tell a little bit about that?
Well, we were in the schools that I worked in. I was very lucky to work with amazing mentors in the schools that I worked in. The schools themselves had a full array of students from different backgrounds, different challenging backgrounds, as well as students who would go off to Oxford, Cambridge, and Edinburgh University, Aberdeen, and the like. And so that hugely comprehensive kind of set of students in front of me, I realised that the that game that I had played was not a game that every student wanted to play. In fact, the minority wanted to play that. They wanted to enjoy themselves, they wanted fun, and here was me teaching French and German to kids who often didn't really see the point in doing that. And to be honest, I could see why they would think that. They're not going to go there. They would prefer to learn Spanish. It's going to be more useful for them in their current life. So I spent a lot of effort trying to work out how to bring relevance to those learners. And really it was through two things. One was we've got to connect to other learners speaking these languages to understand that it's not just about communicating the language, it's about thinking differently, that people from other countries think differently from you. And you don't get that unless you speak their language, unless you can get under the skin of the language. You don't even have to speak it fluently. I'm a great believer in multilingualism. So don't just speak, not bilingualism and the idea of being perfect in 2 or 3 languages, but be an amateur in lots of languages, because it opens up conversation.
It opens up in an incredible way, absolutely.
Yeah.
On the personal level, it's just amazing, of course.
Yeah, I think e-twinning is all about that. It's about understanding culture first and foremost. To do that, in the early 2000s, you were actually limited. There wasn't a lot you could do, and not a lot of teachers in Europe used email still, effectively. Email became a normal kind of thing around 2005 for many teachers throughout Europe, even in French-speaking Canada, where we had some connections. So instead of using email, it was easier to give people a web address and say, go to that, because they didn't need to sign up for anything. And so we had 22 blogs for 22 different school connections going on. We were live blogging through old Nokia 6230 app. The I was very important because that was the internet bit, and it allowed you to do blog posts. It also allowed you to upload photographs from, from the phone. And so we were on the top of the Eiffel Tower doing some of these kind of really innovative things. The most innovative, I think, was when we recorded some audio and podcast that, and we hadn't realized that we had podcasted. And so it was the first secondary school in Europe to podcast. We were one of the first in the world. And doing that and having the blogs next to it meant we ended up front page news on the likes of, Macworld magazine or Guardian newspaper. And so not just me, but colleagues like John Johnson through in Glasgow, David Noble over the river in Fife from here, Mark Pentleton, who of course today runs probably the most downloaded language learning podcast in the world, the Coffee Break French and Spanish, or Coffee Break English series. All of us were innovating in Scotland, often from bedrooms, often from schools where there was not a lot of technology. In fact, having one computer was seen as a disadvantage in many schools, was actually our bonus, because it meant we had to really think about other technologies we could use, and we were using those little MP3 recorders as a way to democratize technology in the classroom for a fraction of the price of the shaky Dell that I had in the corner of my classroom. I think the innovation we created in that time was arguably more innovative than much of the EdTech we see today. I can't believe that. We're spoilt for choice. Technology is really cheap, so we buy it very easily, very quickly. But do we think about it as much as we had to think about it back then to prepare the ground? Just on a classroom management level, how do you get everyone involved when you only have one machine? So student engagement and involvement was #1 priority.
I must say that looking at what I do today with my students, so I almost feel a bit ashamed that I'm not doing a lot more about getting connected, because it is, for heaven's sake, it is so easy today, and it doesn't cost anything. So actually, I hope no e-twinning folks are listening to this now, because I guess that would be bad PR for me. But heck, that's the way it is. And I don't know. Perhaps it's somehow almost too easy these days. I must get better at this. Connecting people, connecting students.
I think it's hard. It's hard to connect adults. I mean, we've we also, I think, the ability to be quiet.
Hmm.
Um, there's times in the year I don't necessarily want to share everything, and I don't want to have lots to read. I've not read a blog feed in months, and I used to be quite I used to be quite keen about making sure my feeds were down to zero, and nowadays that's just impossible. So there's much more out there,
Mm.
and I think that what we've got to be aware of, or what we've got to be wary of, is feeling that we have to do everything for students. And so the idea of teacher using their PLN, their personal learning network, for students is great. But what about students building their own learning network? And is
Yeah.
that something we concentrate on enough? And we're still operating in a very top-down way for network and communication. In one way, teachers do it for students. They're actually power users on Twitter, if you like, who are viewed as, can you give me a shout out for my students, because I need to get comments on their blog, or can you post or retweet this link so that I get comments on my students' work. And then you go and look at it, and the student work's not great, to be honest. It's not had the effort that make it, or if it's meant to be an initial small prototype, then they can do feedback between themselves. Maybe they can use feedback from their own community. But the kind of effort that people take to go and leave feedback is significant. There's so much out there competing for that attention.
Mm.
Students also have to realise that their work has to be really good to catch people's eye and to make them want to give feedback.
Yeah, and in order for them to be proud of what they're doing, in a way.
Another photograph of someone holding up a page saying, I'm doing a project to see how far this can be shared. There's no effort. It's too easy.
Yeah, that's right.
But a piece of amazing creative writing that actually gives pleasure to someone else, or writing a blog post in Medium that inspires people. Funnily enough, people who write those posts tend not to need to pimp and publicize them. They get spread by others who want to spread some great writing. And I think that's a really positive message for kids, which is basically, why should people care what you write? Say in a podcast, it's got to be high quality. It's got to be of interest. And I think you said it at the beginning of this, it's got to be of interest to you.
Yeah.
So this, for us, it's important to have this little conversation to catch up and kind of have in Scots you would say, chew the fat, to have a little conversation and see how things are going. And if no one else watches this, I'll be happy enough, because we've had to catch up.
That's what I feel as well.
10 years with you, but we've had that chance. And I think too many folk, they're kind of sharing for this amorphous audience out there, not really sure who it is, just trying to get attention either for their own work or students' work, instead of concentrating on creating great stuff for themselves. And there are notably some people who just create great stuff for themselves, and it's for itself.
Yeah. Talking about podcasts, by the way, I really believe it's going to be huge. Obviously, it is already, especially in the States, I think. But I think it's going to be huge in Europe as well.
It's interesting. We said this 11 years ago. I've always thought it would be huge as a medium, but I don't think it's that new. The stuff that's huge, the stuff that we really like, if I go into my podcasts, it's things like Serial from NPR, and that kind of content, which in America I think has, as you say, it's been really popular. And you ask yourself, why is it popular? Because no one in the States really listened to that kind of, well, a lot of people listen to that kind of radio broadcasting on radio.
Yeah, basically, perhaps radio sucks more in the States than it does in Europe.
Well, I don't think it's that. I think it's maybe listening habits. I think maybe people don't turn the radio on in the morning. It's more of a television nation. And so when you're able to give beautifully scripted, beautifully put together radio in a format that allows people to then listen to it when they want, whether they're online or not, is going to work. But the one thing that's never changed, particularly when you look at Serial, is the fact that it's really high quality material. There's no two ways about it. It's beautifully
It's
told, beautifully
pro stuff, 100%.
absolutely. And even the startup ones, there are various startup podcasts of tech people sharing their journey. They're very unscripted, but they're telling a great journey that many people would like to follow, and very few ever have the balls to go and do, which is start something and see it through, even when things don't go your way.
But talking about us mere mortals here, like people in education, teachers, I really think that podcast is a great way of reaching out. And shoot, of course, it's not professional like serial or whatever. I bet not at least what I'm doing. But it's a way to reach out, and I think it's so important that people in education have a voice, you know.
I think that there's great stuff that comes from students, and again, I would always look at my students as being my startup. They're the people who are going to create great content, have great conversations. I think it's a lot of what happens in our work in learning, and whether that's in school or not. But, a lot of the work that we have in learning is invisible work. We don't really see it. It's very hard to describe to someone afterwards what you did. A lot of people, if they ask you what do you do, you'll say, "Oh, I'm a teacher." It means lots of different things to them, but it's probably not actually what you did.
By the way, it's kind of interesting the way we put it. Some of us say, well, talking about, for example, about teachers, that at least on my home turf in Sweden, that someone asks you, "What do you do?" and you might answer, "I work as a teacher," or you might say, "I am a teacher." I don't know. Might make a difference, might not.
I think it does make a difference. I think well, maybe it's splitting hairs. I think you've got interesting things around being a teacher. The minute you say that, you're adopting a certain identity.
Absolutely.
The identity is not necessarily the one that you want to have in the long term.
Not necessarily, always.
And when you're working as a teacher, maybe there's also an implication that I'm also in charge of changing this job and changing it to make it the way I think it should be.
Yeah.
The difference I think you're alluding to is some people do it for a job and other people do it because there's something else going on. I'm lucky that 9 times out of 10 the people I'm working with, they've chosen to work with me on the basis that we want to change things. We don't want to stick with the status quo.
Talking about changing things, so I must ask you a bit about TeachMeet, the phenomenon. I guess most educators know about TeachMeet these days, being these informal meetings for teachers where teachers get a chance to tell their colleagues what they do in the classroom, basicly, like in a very concentrated manner. But how did all that get started? Did you like just scribble down something on a paper napkin or what?
Well, it wasn't even that well developed. It was John Johnson, David Noble, and myself at a big teacher conference, not unlike the ones you have in Sweden, where you have all the big names coming from overseas to tell you how to do your job. But these guys are they're telling us stuff that we've been doing for years.
All right.
Would it not be more fun to go to the pub and stretch your own thing together? And I think every teacher has that moment of thinking, gosh, I've heard this before, I'd rather sit with my friends and learn something from them. So the idea of a very informal, first of all, has to be informal. Why? Because the formal thing, there's tons of it. You can go to any conference. You can go to actually lots of unconferences advertised as, the collective or, half our attendees are students. But when you walk in, it's still the confines of a conference. Someone has organized it. Someone has, there is catering, there are things like that. And I like the idea of saying, well, what would happen if you had none of those constraints? What would emerge? Now, there are teach meets and teach meets. There are some like the big one at BET, which
Yeah.
feels more like a convention of people who've maybe run a Teach Meet in the past. And actually, if you were a first-time person heading along to a Teach Meet there, it's a very unfair representation of what most people like.
I've been
Um,
there only once. I did then attend to teach me there, and it was tons of fun. I must say that.
it's fun, but it's very. I think now it's almost too big. It feels like a convention.
Yeah,
The,
yeah, right. Okay, I
the best
understand what you mean.
the best ones for me are the ones held in a cafe
Hmm.
or a
Hmm.
pub or cinema. I've seen one of them in, and it's informal. It is fun. It's slightly badly organised in that there's maybe not enough catering for everyone. Maybe there's some beer. Maybe someone's been able to find some bottles
Yeah, that's
somewhere.
always a good thing if there's a little bit of beer.
But above all, it's away from school,
Yeah,
and it's
I'm absolutely agreed.
yeah, quite a small group. So
Mm.
small enough to have a pause and let everyone chat with everyone else. And I think the other vital thing is no PowerPoints, no sales
Yeah,
talk.
yeah, right.
Um, all the things that basically, if you see it in a traditional event, don't have it here. So we're coming up to the 10th birthday of Teach Me, and I'm trying to encourage people. When we first created it, it was the three of us meant it as a response to the formal conference, and so
Hmm.
small, and it was brilliant. And
Like a grassroots revolution.
yeah, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it go back more to that. And I think to achieve that, we need to encourage more and more people to hold more frequent but much smaller events.
Mm.
Forget about sponsorship. We don't need it. Forget about needing, audio visual. You don't need audio visual if you're not showing a PowerPoint.
Mm.
And I think the other one is that somewhere along the line, people forgot that it's about telling stories.
Yeah,
So there
that's
are
true.
too many demos, too many kind of people attempting to create keynotes.
Hmm. Yeah, mini keynotes.
Yeah, you've got 5 minutes,
Yeah,
7 minutes, tell your story. And when teachers tell great stories, they tell great stories. When they try to do something else, it's not guaranteed that they're going to tell a great keynote or a great spotlight session.
yeah,
Um,
right.
it's a different type of presentation, it's a different type of storytelling. It does take a lot more practice than I think any teacher wants to take on that. It should be light touch. You should be able to stroll up with nothing prepared to
Mm.
teach me and still have something that you can share when your name's called out. And that art of storytelling is something every teacher is an expert at.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes there's too much tech, perhaps.
Yeah, there is for me anyway.
Um, it's interesting talking about presenting and presentations. Like I noticed that quite a few of like our students, they seem to have this idea that almost like that a presentation equals a some kind of a PowerPoint thing, you know, and that of course means I've been doing a lousy job,
Oh,
but it's really depressing if those guys think that that's the main thing, your slides, for heaven's sake. I
mhm.
mean, presenting, it's something completely different, hopefully, at least if it's supposed to be any good.
Yeah, I think if you're telling a student story above all, then that's normally inspiring in and of itself. And some of the best, the best student teach meets where they've taken the reins are the ones where they maybe come over as the least prepared because they don't have a PowerPoint, they don't have their presentation ready.
Hmm.
But you've got to bear in mind, you know, for a lot of kids, school has become about it has become this thing of we've got to make another presentation. It's become the principal way that they show their knowledge, and they're fed up of it.
Yeah.
Particularly in middle years, particularly in high school, it's always like, oh, have we got a presentation in this? And they associate projects with presentations rather than seeing projects as a way to be creative in the way that you
Right.
get a story.
Right.
And I see it in industry as well. This is not a schools thing. In industry, it's become the norm for some reason to produce everything as a PowerPoint.
Hmm. Yeah.
Something that would fit onto one text file as a couple of bullet points becomes a
Hmm.
10 slide PowerPoint pitch, and people send PowerPoints back and forth to each other for comments and feedback.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Put it as a text file, even use a post-it note and sketch it out that way.
Hmm. Yeah, it can work just as well sometimes.
Absolutely.
And I must say some of the very best presentations or say lectures I've ever seen or heard, they didn't have anything like that at all. Extremely low tech. Like you said, someone who was really good at telling about something interesting did just that.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that can be so powerful.
And I think I use a lot of slides when I'm presenting in a more keynote type capacity.
Like pictures.
They're photographs, yeah. And the photographs are painting a picture quicker, perhaps, than me describing it might be. I've actually gone through the exercise of taking what is a 7-minute talk with some pictures and writing it down. And then when you read the written down version, it becomes an hour long because it's so rich and there's so much in those photos that you can choose to dive into or choose not to when you're presenting. But actually writing it out, there's a beautiful backstory there that you don't always hear in a talk.
I think I'm all over the place a little bit here, but talking about education in general and say perhaps the European side of things. You've been around for quite a while and you've seen quite a lot, experienced quite a lot on several levels, I'd say, in education. Where are we heading, or are we heading in a number of separate directions which lead nowhere? What's going on? What's your view on this?
I don't know. It's too big a question, really.
Yeah, sure.
I'm exhausted from all the choice that we have and the things that we could do, and it's taken time. It's probably taken me 2.5 years of figuring it out to realize that we do better when we do one thing really well, and not one thing, but do a couple of things really well. I think that there was a period in teaching, and particularly using technology side, where you could get away with trying to be, a foot in every camp, where you could actually try and do everything if you wanted to. I think that stopped around 2008, 2009. And I think for the last 6 years, people who've been trying to do that are either superhuman, they're EdTech consultants, and it's their chief marketing effort, and therefore that's what they do. Or they've paid the price they've paid the price from becoming fed up with it all. And I think that actually I'm having less and less patience to feel that I need to track every conversation to do with what I do. So when I see stuff in design thinking that I look at it and go, that's a really facile way of looking at things. That's, there's so much more depth that could be had there. Instead of caring too much about it, I have to let things go and just pick my battles. And my battles are working with amazing schools that want to make a difference, rather than attempting to change the mindsets of hundreds of others that aren't really actually that interested. Say they are, but then you look just a little bit under the surface, you realize it's just another thing for them on the checklist.
How important do you think are the PISA results that are all over the newspapers and media everywhere these days?
The PISA results in Scotland have led to our education minister, our government, undertaking very rash decisions, which I don't believe are actually founded in research. I don't know who they're listening to either, but they're certainly not listening to the at least 50% who would say standardized testing maybe isn't the magic bullet that they think it is. PISA tests are overrated. I think the results of them can be useful for broad brushstroke decision making. Unfortunately, I don't know one government that actually thinks in broad brushstrokes. They think in 4 or 5 month spells at a time. Even our government, which has some legitimate confidence in being around for far longer than 4 years, through its current policy, shows, I think, shorter term thinking. That's in Scotland. In England, they've been at that game a long time. Wherever I go around the world, I think I just see PISA is just one little bolt of information in a whole machine. And the person who understands that machine best is the classroom teacher. I've not met one classroom teacher that needs a score to tell them which kid needs more support and which one needs pushed harder.
You got a point there, for sure.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to quality of teachers. And I'm lucky most of my time is spent working with teachers who really want to become better and better and better. Some of them are already excellent. Some of them I don't feel I can add any value to at all, because just the work they are doing is the kind of stuff I would be taking photographs of and talking about and saying, guys, look over here, this is it. And I also work with teachers who have been teaching a long time and have maybe grown weary of doing that thing again, and come 55, we've got lovely feedback from 55, 56, 57-year-old teachers saying, wow, I was ready to throw in the spanner early, and after experiencing some different ways of looking at things, I'm really upset that I've got to retire in 3 years, in 8 years. I just want to keep going. So
whoa.
Yeah, you get the whole spread, and the ability to help people get re-impassioned for what they were passionate for maybe 30 or 40 years earlier on is quite special.
So obviously you are, if I got it right, you're mainly working on a consultant basis these days, right? Through Notash, your company?
That's right. I have a great team working with me too. Nearly all of our work is long term. So we're working with, like I say, maybe 60 to 70% with schools, the rest of the time with big engineering companies, media firms, the odd fashion company, helping them undertake their own creative renewal, or create new products, or think up new ideas. And it is consultancy, but not in the way that I remember being consulted, which is someone comes and ships their ideas onto you.
Yeah, right.
This is the insert name of company here, way. And there's a lot of that kind of, the large consultancy firms will shift their model, and they'll have things like a model. We have no model. We have no stuff. We go in and we listen. And we really partner up with each and every team to create something bigger than the sum of the parts involved. And every time I've had 2 bad days in the job where the people on the other end didn't get that was their role. And sometimes you still get an interesting one with quite often big international schools will maybe think that you are somehow delivering a service.
Okay.
Coming in, here you go. And it just takes a little while, a couple of days, not a long time, a couple of days to realize what collaboration really means. And the fact that it's hard for both sides involved. You've got to get to know each other, and you've got to really believe that you can create something spectacular together. And that goes not just for schools. That's the same with any organization, governmental, private corporation, you name it.
You have been working with some pretty big players, including Google, or am I mistaken?
Google is one of our clients. Yeah,
okay.
a lot of our biggest players were not really able to say who they are.
Yeah, right.
So,
did that just get into some secrets here?
Exactly. So we work with a big German.
It was on the web, for heaven's sake, not on the dark web either. So
exactly. We work with a big German industrial company that plays in the automotive sector. We work with Google. That I can say that, but some of the work we've done there is fascinating, helping to redesign what has now become the Google Innovator Program, really putting that idea of not just learning about Google tools, but learning to think like a Googler at the heart of things. And it's been huge. It's a huge success. And I think it's meant that the innovators coming through that program are incredibly empowered and engaged. We work for a couple of the other big tech firms too. I think what's interesting is that it's not often in education either. It's not always in education. It's sometimes in the product side, the mainstream side, and they're interested at looking at that from a young person's perspective. So bringing young people's perspectives in is something that they often struggle with. And we've also worked with organizations like the IBO, the International Baccalaureate Organization, to help them think differently about how they engage with their community. And these are big organizations, and they've got there's a lot at stake but there's a lot at stake for getting it right as well as getting it wrong. And it's the kind of stuff that an individual consultant just cannot do on their own. You need a team. You need a team that challenges whoever is doing the piece of work, who can support it. And also the sheer quantity of work we're doing is incredible. We're working pretty flat out most of the year in Australia, in Europe, right across Europe, in French-speaking Canada in particular. And we're doing a lot of online coaching now with school leaders all over Southeast Asia, through Europe, into over the pond and into the States and North America. And we've even begun making some inroads in South America. But again, the ability now to work online with people is great. It just it saves the planet a little bit. We don't have to schlep around in airplanes quite so much. It allows us to do more and more for much less cost to people. And yeah, it's totally different, I think, from what people envisage consulting being. And we're quite proud of the fact that all of our team are full-time. There's no one who's just kind of brought in for the odd job or two. And that team is really important for me.
Yeah. What do you think about the fact that, talking about these big players, big multinational companies like Google and Apple and Microsoft, that these guys are pretty much one of these guys, if you want to have, it seems, at least to me, if you want to have well-functioning pedagogical IT infrastructure without getting ruined. Do you see a problem here that it's just those guys who are delivering the goods all over the world soon, it seems, almost?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I think that, if government were to do it, it would cost a fortune and it wouldn't work. And we know that because we tried in Scotland and it did cost a fortune and it doesn't work. When my job as national advisor years ago was to advise them on how to best invest their interest, their effort. And I was quite public. You still find painful newspaper stories about it that, I felt GLOW, the national schools intranet that we have here in Scotland, was not worth pursuing, given the growth of technologies provided by at least those three big players and many more besides. Actually, those three big players are, people might say, they have too much power, blah, blah, blah. If we want to try and recreate what they've done, go for it, but please don't use my taxes to pay for it. I'm quite happy, actually, to have technology that works, largely, most of the time, for free, very often. And I'm quite happy to pay, as well, for quality hardware. I think we have a funny notion in education that education is not an industry. We get it as consultants, of course. People always want something for nothing.
Yeah, let's go for this because it's free.
Yeah, exactly. And so they'll look at a service which is more expensive and they'll say, oh, we can't afford that. Well, the problem is that when it's free, it ain't very good. If you pay peanuts, you're going to get monkeys. So,
I like that.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing is that we tend to ignore the inherent costs that are in education. Education is a really expensive business.
Absolutely.
Everything is in the millions, whichever way you look at it. And we often find it's interesting that people will debate over a couple of €100 for professional learning on the side of the provider. What are you going to provide? Without considering the fact that they've got, let's say, 100 people turning up, 100 people's salary for one day. Just capturing all that together is probably in the region of about €80,000 by the time you've taken in the cost of the facilities, the lunch, everything else. So, struggling over a couple of €100 doesn't cut it with me. The priorities are in the wrong place there. Making sure teachers are free to learn, that they're not sat there meant to learn and thinking about the horrible email they just got, telling them that they've not put the results in for the report card. That is where we need to invest our efforts, and we need to stop worrying so much about, a couple of hundred here or there. When it comes to technology, it's never a couple of hundred here or there. It's a couple of tens of thousands. And I also have more confidence, I think, in people in technology and making those decisions today to get the right decision. I have huge admiration for many of the technology directors I work with. They are, to say they're on top of it, they're on top of their game. Every one of them knows what the score is at any given point, and they also understand that when the time comes, you just have to make a decision. There's no such thing as waiting until the next model comes out. Just go, just get whatever's there and get going with it.
Yeah, obviously, I am a Google Apps what do you call it, super admin in my school since well, in my case, the choice was easy. I had to do something about it. About what? About the workflow, basically, because the workflow was just so awful. My own workflow, that is,
Yeah.
with my colleagues and my students, and it was just horrible. You know, things were floating around like you know, email attachments being transferred directly between computers. Some of the stuff was on paper. Anything you can think of, and it was just killing me, you know. And it got so bad that I really didn't have a choice. I felt that either I got to do something about this, or I have to find something else to do, because it was like eating me alive, this whole situation. Yeah, and
That's right.
And of course, then the reason that I chose to run with Google Apps was pretty simple, and mainly because I knew it worked. I'd been using that stuff like in the private capacity for quite a while, so I knew it worked, and I knew a little bit what I was like getting into. Not all the way, of course.
And what you find as well is, you know, you think back 10 years ago, often our personal experience was limited to one or the other, and it was, you know, Mac or PC. Now, I think most decision makers' expertise is spread over a very large run of technologies. We're actually familiar with more things firsthand, and so the decisions become easier to make. I also think every one of these firms makes it incredibly easy, because they have invested a fortune on professional learning that would never have been spent otherwise. All three of them have invested multi-million dollar investments in getting teacher education up, where governments have not provided it in some ways, or haven't been able to in that scale. So yeah, I have quite a positive outlook on that. I know some people choose to be grinchy about it, but I think there's more promise to be had in following up with them and seeing what's next, and designing that with them, not just to be told this is the next shipping, but co-designing great learning with them.
Yeah, talking about hardware, I really couldn't possibly care less. If it works and gets the job done, it's fine with me. It really doesn't matter the least if it's got some kind of fruit logo on it or whatnot. I really don't care at all.
As long as it works when you turn it on.
As long as it works and gets the job done. We've been talking here for quite a while, and I guess you want to be heading home, perhaps, if you're not at home. Are you at home right now, or are you at work?
This is No Tosh in Edinburgh, which is
you said that is your office with the drum set and everything.
That's right.
Very nice. I'm still at work as well. I always run these things at work. I couldn't possibly do it at home. Too many distractions, like the fridge and whatnot. So and you really want to have like a life separate from work as well, perhaps sometimes.
Definitely. Today's not going to happen though. We're on a late one today.
So I must say it's been really tons of fun talking with you again. It's been way too long, Ewan. I must say that.
I'll see you in 2027. Is that right?
It might be. It might be. Oh heavens, time just really flies. It does. Amazing.
No, it's been good fun and really interesting round robin. Trying to write that one up as a bullet point summary will be interesting. But no, thanks for reaching out and asking for the time. I'm glad we were able to make it. And I think, you know, we keep going. I'm looking forward to seeing you at an e-twinning event at some point in the future, I'm sure.
Sure. Sometime again. Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
For taking the time, and take good care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.